Compute. So welcome to you all for this. Okay, so this is a little bit about me. Who am I? What I do? Okay, so of course you can read this. I'm available on this Twitter. So in case you have any questions, you can tweet me, and I generally reply soon on that. So that is something you can note down in case you want to kind of chat later post the session. So okay, so what we are going to do today. So we'll quickly talk about what is cloud computing in very high level and high level about cloud services, and then we'll go in detail about compute. That is the main agenda of today, and then we'll have a different scenario on how we can determine that a compute platform or compute service A is right for you or B is right for you. So we have a good I would say we'll be going through the good kind of flow chart to help you determine that how you can take a decision on some of these things. Okay, and then in the last we'll have demo on one of the compute service called VM and how you can create it. Okay, so let's get started, and of course there will be some opportunity for any question answer also in the end. Cloud computing, right? This is the main thing. Of course, basically, I think most of you hopefully understand it that why it is important, right? Some point I'll touch upon is the main benefit is of course cost, because that is a prevailing feature or enabler why business are kind of moving, more and more businesses moving towards cloud. The main reason is of course they are need to pay upfront. That is called like CapEx, right? So capital expenditure is something they can avoid. They can just pay for the use they make. So that is way economical than setting up themselves. So that is a primary reason. Basically, of course, there are a bunch of other reasons you can consider, like scaling. You can consider like reliability, and reliability, of course, bunch of factors like whether it's highly available. Of course, different availability zones you can set up. You do have features for DRs, fault tolerance, and of course, because Azure is one of the biggest cloud platform, it has most number of data centers among any other cloud providers. So it has a real big global reach, and hence you can also get a benefit around good number of like replications. So you can replicate your application and data pretty much in most places in the world. So there is again an advantage about in general is the advantage of cloud, but of course we'll be talking more on Azure, so I'm just touching upon that as well. As I said about global replication, global reach. So of course you have more regions, you can replicate the data closer to the user. That is essential actually. We'll talk more on that, why is it important. And performance, because they have they are kind of since they are reaching closer to the user, the latency of user versus application is hosted is reduced. So that also kind of can be that advantage can also be taken. Okay, this screenshot you might have seen a lot, but the new thing, new instance you can find, it is serverless here, right side second option. So if you just kind of watch out how this cloud computing has evolved over the last 10 years. So of course IaaS came first, and it's not a surprise that AWS came first in the market with IaaS offering. Later Azure jumped in. They started with PaaS initially, but later they also came into IaaS. Serverless, after the serverless started coming in, it is more of a, you can say, a specialized implementation of PaaS. It is a PaaS, but specialized implementation. So it's like even more, you don't need to even configure for scaling. So it takes care of scaling. So you just need to kind of use it and move on. So like event driven, right? Those kind of model. SaaS, of course, we know that it's like just need to configure a few things and you're done. So moving on. This also maybe some of you may be aware that when we talk about cloud computing, these are some of the things that we should be aware of. Public cloud like Azure uses mostly rented hardware, so they're not that costly. But of course, still businesses and companies are a little bit sensitive on keeping the like IP address or sensitive data on public cloud, so they prefer private cloud on those cases. And there's one more category called hybrid. So it is a mix of both, like you can say mix or you can say goodness of both. So you can use services that are not that sensitive into public cloud, and services which you care most and you think that you should handle yourself rather instead of some other vendor is handling. So you can keep those on private cloud. This is multi-cloud is a not too late kind of recent phenomenon that came in maybe last 2-3 years, and now it is even going more. With more and more cloud players coming in market, it is even getting more momentum in terms of that whether you can use a capability of cloud A and also the B capability of cloud B. So mix of like, or you can say goodness of both cloud providers. So if we talk about, I have seen people using some of the AI capability of Google Cloud and some of the capability of even AWS and like web, and if they're coming from Microsoft background, they prefer to use application related services from Azure. So though any cloud provider may provide most of the services, but if you want to kind of evaluate that, okay, which service in which cloud vendor is more fit for you, you can go for it. Of course, it comes with complexity also because you need to establish a connection it's not so straightforward. So it comes up with additional architectural complexity and in some cases even a hardware complexity. But it depends on the use case that what is more important for you, whether the benefits, right, the kind of trade-off, whether taking the advantage of additional cloud vendor is important for you, or you want to kind of get the cost of making it enable is like more kind of playing more role. So you need to choose like whether to go for whether we can continue to use services of the same cloud provider versus using multiple. So let's move on. Okay, so I think Mohit have covered pretty much on these services, so I'm not going to go on detail. Just a high level that these are some of the common services. They are the only ones. There are a bunch of other services that Azure has. These are some of the most commonly used services, right? We'll talk more on compute now. Okay, so again, compute also has many other, at least several other, if not many, that kind of recently, some of them recently came in. Some are like extended services of the main service like that. So we have taken the most commonly used here to talk about more and also to understand like what makes sense, like which service makes sense where. So this is basically I just taken this screenshot from the portal itself. So this is how they look when you go to. We'll also have a demo when we look into like these compute options. So virtual machine is the most traditional option, by the way, guys. In compute world, it is the most like earliest option that was available, and this is still a good option if you want more control here. So it is like if you're looking for more control on your application or setup. Of course, we'll talk more on this, like what is the use cases, but at a high level, it gives you more control, but also more control also comes with more responsibility. So that is an aspect we need to consider. Azure Container Instance and Azure Kubernetes, these two guys are part of the same family called containerization, though they have like difference in terms of scaling up and capabilities and workload. If these things are more, the recommendation is to use AKS, Kubernetes service. But if it's like straightforward scenario, at the same time you want to utilize the power of container or benefits of containers, ACI is something that is also given that we can use. Azure Functions, it is an offering for that we were looking in the earlier screenshot about serverless. So it is coming from there. Of course, apart from functions, we also have something called Logic App. on some scenario that is more long running and orchestration kind of scenario where you have this different business process. But yeah, this is something we have taken that is most commonly used. So these are four primary things that we'll talk more as we progress. So let's consider the first one, virtual machine, right? So they said it is the most traditional one that is there in the lot. And let's talk about from the scenario when you really want to go with VMs, right? So I was talking that it gives you more control, like most control among other options that you have, because like machine itself, it's not physical one, it's a virtual one, but still you have options to kind of, it's like a machine, real machine actually you're getting in cloud. So you can do pretty much everything that you may do in your own laptop or your own desktop, right? Uh, Exception is that, of course, it's a virtualized environment. So this is something that when you, some of the use cases could be that, okay, you want to try out different apps, how they work in different OS. Sometimes there is a requirement that we're developing some applications and we want to test that, hey, how it is working in Windows versus Linux versus Mac. So you can spin up different VMs in the cloud, in the Azure in this case, and test it out. So you don't need to, of course, you can spin them, you can test it, and you can deallocate them. So you don't need to pay for entire duration. So it's like testing and developing app on different OS. So that is something we're talking about. That you have flexibility to like plug and play. You just deploy and keep spinning up different OSs the way you want to test, and don't to worry too much on a cost side, because it will be you just need to pay for the time you will be using that. Custom softwares again, there are some specialized software you are developing, and of course you deploying across different OSs. So in that case also you need to deploy in multiple machines with different operating systems. So that is other use case. And of course, see, PaaS, platform as a service, will not give you many options to configure the hosting environment, right? Though earlier there was some offering called cloud services that is no more recommended by Microsoft, where we had a worker role and web role kind of stuff. There you could even see some of the VMs thing. You can say it was sitting between VM, and nowadays we have app service. But the cloud service is not being recommended of late, because Microsoft came up with a bunch of new services. So the idea is that app service may not give you, that is a pure PaaS app, may not give you many configuration hosting options, like you can play around with IaaS setting. But in case of IaaS or VM, you get pretty much everything, because it's a pure, like it's a machine literally, and you can configure the IaaS, and you can play around with different like different settings in the IaaS that otherwise PaaS service will not give you. If you have any application that requires custom setting in the deployment, right? Deployment environment. One more use case you can think about is that, see, your VMs are basically the most commonly, when you have a workload, we are deploying some application into the VMs, right? VM also has something called VM scale sets. So suppose you're deploying some application in VM, if you want to take advantage of, like, there's something called scale up and scale out. So scale out scenario is pretty common for VM. So there is some load balancer scenario, and of course there are some VMs behind the load balancer. And suppose one machine got down, you can spin up more. That is one. If you want more computing power, of course you can set them into the VM scale sets. It will give you more computing power. So that's how you can extend your data center we're talking about. So that is some of the typical scenario one may want to go with Azure VM. Okay, let's talk about container instance. In short, we call it ACI. So I was saying that ACI and AKS both are coming from a similar family called containerization.